Hello, this is the presentation about Albert Bandura. I will share my screen. Albert Bandura and Social Learning and Cognitive Theory is the name of their perspective, and is presented by me, Nicolás Arias Velandia, for the historical and theoretical basis for early childhood education course. First of all, we have to think that that approach is called social learning theory first, and then it becomes named social cognitive theory. What have in common these photos? These photos, as you can see here, are have children, have adults doing different activities and doing almost activities that they are learning by imitation and observation. And this is much of that is what is all about the Bandura's theory. Albert Bandura was born in Montreal, province of Alberta, Canada, from son of immigrants from Poland and Ukraine, rural workers with almost no education, but who value education. He got his elementary, secondary, and high school education in his hometown of Munderk in Canada. And he got his major in psychology in the University of British Columbia, and graduate students in clinical psychology in the University of Iowa, and all his career faculty at the Stanford University in California. In 1974, he was president of the American Psychological Association. Some circumstances in the world that were happening at this moment were the end of the First World War, the things that make the Russian Revolution, that maybe triggered the immigration of his parents to Canada, the acquisition of autonomy and creation of welfare state in Canada, the Second World War, the post-war some post-war events like the Cold War, the rise of some communist states, the spatial race, the Vietnam War, and the constant conflicts in the Cold War era, the end of the most communist states, and the most contemporary as like the massification of internet, the economic crisis of 2028, the attack of Twin Towers, and the Arab Spring movements, the major agreements on climate change, and recently the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic. Having in account that he was born in 1925 and died in 2021. His intellectual work around when he was consolidating his career, it was a dominant of behaviorist views with some defying findings, for example, from memory performance and patterning species who are different in ethology in the inner paradigm, and from outside the symposium of the cognitive revolution in Hickson and MIT, with emerging figures like Noam Chomsky, Newell Simon, and Jerome Bruner and George Miller. In Bandura's work, we have to note that he has different periods. The first period is the 1960s for the study of behavior in social settings where the social context is self-rewarding, and is through by imitation as a cognitive process. In the 1970s, there's more development on observational learning and the study of models. And in the 1980s, the study of effort and belief in our own ability. The first endeavor that we have from Bandura is that social behavior plays an important role in human learning. This is important because when behavior applies, it give clues how which behavior applies in given social circumstances. At the beginning, he worked from the behaviorist view that studied the classical conditioning, operant conditioning. We remember classical conditioning association in stimuli in the dog with Pavlov, that the dog learned to associate the sound of the bell to the apparition, the food, and this is why it becomes conditioned. And in operant conditioning is the relationship between our responses and consequences in the environment. And it could be formed through different programs of reinforcement, like the fixed radio responses, the variable radio responses, the fixed interval responses, and the variable interval responses. The fixed radio is when each time the person performs correctly, we give them reward. Variable is when we have a certain number of responses, we give reward. In fixed interval is when is based on time, is that when the people is behaving and we each certain time, fixed time, we give them reward. And the variable interval response program is when the people is or animals are behaving, and we give them each time some reinforcement, but it is not in a fixed time, but more in a non-fixed time at variable intervals. And they show that all of that programs helps to create responses to the environment, and they become stronger in the variable programs more than in the fixed, and more resistant to extinction. Where he began to work, Bandura note that we in social situation, we learn by observation, and we learn faster than we learn by reinforcement. And it was in psychology studies and psychology labs, and in anthropological evidence in girls in Guatemala that observe a lot of time adults performing to do fabrics, and then they begin to working them in almost with almost no errors during that, and in a very fast way. It leads to in learning through observation, and learning through observation needs models, that is said, people that we imitate, or different fictionary characters or creative narrative models that we value them. That's why they become models, and they learn us they lead us to learn through the other's experience also in a vicarious way, attend to others' behavior, and depend that learning on our own personal traits and a history of learning. It opens doors, of course, to analysis of some media influence and analysis of behavior growth in certain contexts. That is where the point where we finish our first part of our presentation. Thanks.